Hey guys, hey ladies, hey friends, hey foes. We just wanted to take a second to remind you that while we're okay swearing when little ears are listening, you might not be, and that's okay. So here's your chance to pause us and wait for nap time, or pop in your earbuds. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to Done Playing by the Rules. You guys, we have gone live and we have been getting such fun feedback, and we don't know when this episode will air. It's probably going to be a couple months after we've gone live, but I hope that you have continued to enjoy the episodes. My name is Jenelle.
And I'm Jenna.
Today, we're going to talk about something that is super important to me and Jenna. Again, we're not experts, but we've had a fair amount of experience with experts. I have at least. But we work really hard to keep ourselves honest and to raise honest kids. It's awkward and it's creepy and it's hard. And I grew up where parents weren't honest with kids all the time. You and I are making a really concerted effort to raise honest kids and be honest with our kids, even if it makes us look like complete lunatics at the doctor's office.
And everywhere. The other day, luckily it was just my son and I. If anyone had heard the conversation, my grandma would have been like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Shout out Marilyn. She's now a listener, which I love.
Oh, I love Marilyn.
So backtrack a little bit. I was on my computer doing some podcast stuff, and my son is very into it, so he always wants to see. And so I was showing him, if you're a podcast junkie like I am, it's like recommendations and stuff like that. And this one pops up, and he's starting to read, and he's like, Dr. Duh. And I was like, Dr. Death. And he was like, oh, I don't think I want to see that. And it had like a picture of a syringe, and my son freaks out at any kind of needle, blood, everything. And so then fast forward like 3 days later, we hop in my car and automatically my car connects to my Bluetooth and a podcast starts playing. And it was natural hippie one. So it wasn't anything. And he was like, is this Dr. Death? And I was like, oh no, honey, like it's not. And he was like, so what is Dr. Death? And I was like, well, I haven't listened to it, but I imagine it's about murder. And he was like, so you like murder? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, you always read books about murder and watch shows and everything, and I don't like it. And I was like, okay, well, I do. So then he was like, well, why do you like murder? I was like, well, think about it, son. You like king cobras, but what would you do if you saw one? And he was like, I would freak out and run away. And I was like, exactly. I was like, sometimes things that kind of scare us also intrigue us. That's how I feel about murder. It's not something I would ever do. And so it kind of intrigues me, and I just find it really fascinating. And same with you and like king cobras and sharks and all of that. Like you wouldn't want to confront them, but you find them fascinating. And then he was like, okay, mom, but just promise me you won't practice murder on me. And I was like, oh, honey, I promise you.
When you told me this conversation, I thought that was really interesting because Zach now can read the covers of my books. Like they always are like, when a murder, when a rye, and this and that. And I am a murder junkie also. He was like, why do you read so much about murder? And I was like, oh, basically just like brushed him off. Like I wish I could have had that conversation with him, and next time he asks I will, because that was a really well thought out, astute way to answer a tricky question with a 6-year-old that wants to know
and
why
don't get me wrong,
murder.
I mean, that was a great conversation, and I think it really helped his mind because he's asked me about murder before. I think he's heard the word, he knows about death, and so he's heard those kind of things, and so he's just at that age where it's more of like a concept he can understand. But there are times where I'm like, it's a mommy thing, because I just
it's a mom thing.
So don't feel guilty if that's you, because that's been me many times.
It's probably my creepy 4-year-old that's obsessed with bones and skulls and skeletons and organs and talks about it at the dentist. He probably exposed Ezra.
Yeah, right? But
okay,
this is a hot topic for me. I don't know about you. Growing up, I wasn't lied to, but there was a lot of broken promises, and they weren't on purpose. My dad was just super busy and he worked a lot. So I'm extra sensitive to it, as well as there was some stuff within my parents' marriage. And I don't know, it's a hot topic for me, and it always has been. And my husband knows that. And I'm not a fan of the word lying because it's very aggressive, especially with kids, but I do use it because I think they need to know. I was reading a book called The Lying Game. And so my son was like very into like, so it's a game. Like it's a really hot topic for me because I include broken promises, kind of sweeping things under the rug, and omission as well. Like all of that kind of goes under this umbrella for me.
Oh, interesting. I don't use the word lying. I always have trouble with words. Like I'm still learning how to use the word penis. But I use fibbing because lying was always
Mhm.
too much for me. But I think that your position is interesting, that it is something adults lie and it is something that we need to
Mhm.
prepare them for as they grow up, that lying is
Yeah.
a real thing and they're not going to be able to be at their job and be like, Joe didn't do his project. He's fibbing. Like, you're
Right?
right. I
Yeah.
mean, lying is a real concept that we do need to explain to them, but I've just always
Right.
shied away from it because it makes me,
Me
ugh.
too, and I don't know what that is or what the science behind that is, and it's also interesting, I always say, like, "not telling the truth," I use that little phrase, but
Yep.
the second my son learned lying and liar, that was, like, his go-to. When he would get really mad, "She's lying," or "She's a liar," and I'm just like, "Whoa, like, where did that come
It's
from?"
fun when they just come up with like a really
Oh,
derogatory word to yell at
right?
people.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure on our play date the other day, my son was like, "She's lying," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, here we go." So
So fun.
the chances of us using that in our house are very slim, but the few times we have, it stuck. So thank you,
Well,
son.
yeah, we were talking, you and I, in preparation for this episode, and I had shared with you, and I'm going to run through my little list of my top best advice I've gotten. So I have like a big network of aunts. Some of them were kindergarten teachers. I have like 50 cousins, literally big, and everybody gets together and talks about this stuff all the time. So I was talking to my mom today, and I was like, what are the big things, like the cornerstones that we talked about lying growing up? And one of the big ones that she told me and that stuck out with me was, I'm going to reference an article here by Charity Ferreira, and it's called 12 Tips for Raising Truthful Kids. And it starts with little kids and then goes up to teenagers. She talks about in the article, and my mom said, never set up a kid to lie, especially
Mm.
preschoolers. So she talks about in the article how if you see your kid comes in and his mouth is covered with juice and there's a flipped over juice on the counter, are you going to say to that kid, did you drink the juice? You know they did. So let's skip over the part where you do like an entrapment game and
I've
let's
never
just
thought
say,
of that. That's
oh,
cool.
yeah,
I
it's
like that.
huge. I mean, you're going to cut out half of your opportunities for lying by
Right.
just saying, I see you spilled the juice and drank the juice even though mommy told you not to. Can we talk about why that happened? Or now you're in trouble, like
Mhm.
whatever the situation is. And so just don't set it up for them. If
Right.
you
That
know
makes
they
sense.
got out of bed, don't be like, did someone get out of bed last night? Because
Yeah. They're gonna say no.
what's
Come on.
why? Yeah, and so now you're just setting up a lie
Mhm.
when it could have just been avoided by saying like, "I saw you on the monitor get out of bed last night. Can you tell me what you were doing up?"
Mhm.
Right there,
Makes
you're gonna
sense.
cut down your lying by what, 15-20% out of the
Right.
gate. I think that's a huge one. So this is one that I shared with Jenna, and Jenna loves. And I got this from my aunt Marcia. She was a kindergarten teacher. And she said, ask your kids if they're telling you something you believe to be untrue. Is that true or do you wish it was true? And is that true or do you wish it was true gives them a really easy slick out. So they've
Mhm.
started to paint themselves into this corner where they're telling this story. It isn't factual, isn't true, maybe by accident, maybe on purpose. I have found 99% efficacy in,
Mhm.
is it true or do you wish it was true?
Yes, and I will attest, I have started using that one, and it also makes the situation a little more lighthearted, and I feel
Hmm.
like my kids are more likely gonna tell me the truth because it almost seems a little playful, and
Yep.
so my son will be like, "Well, I wish it was the truth, and I also wish da 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 da," and then it's like, "Okay, now
Yeah.
that we're sidetracked, we gotta talk about what we're gonna talk about," but and it's
It
so
does, it
true,
levels
and
it down.
yes, and it's not like pointing fingers, "Are
Yeah.
you lying?" It's, "Do you wish that was true?" And it just kind of has like a playful tone and like then we can have more in-depth conversations
Yeah, your
about
other option is that true or are you lying? Like,
exactly.
what if we talk to 6-year-olds and give them a mythical out that's
Mhm.
more fun and silly? And then they could say, I wish it was true, but I mean, like, Mikey
Mhm.
hit me. Is that true or do you wish it was true? Well, he's just driving me nuts. And like,
Mhm.
they might not say, I wish it was true, but they're going to say a more realistic version of events usually.
Exactly. You have nailed it on the head with these. These
Why
are
would a
great.
kid lie is my next thing. And then I said, you and I practiced the same thing, which I got from my mom and her family was we never lie to our kids about shots or doctor's appointments or surgeries. My mom learned this from watching, like her brother went to a doctor that would say, flex your muscles. And then while he was flexing his muscles, give him a shot. And my
Mm-mm.
mom was
Ow!
like,
That would also
what?
be bad.
Show me how big your muscles are. And then he'd grab his arm and give him a shot. And my mom was
Oh
like,
my god.
that builds like your kid thinks he's about to like show off to a doctor who's going to say, oh, your muscles are so big. And instead he gets a trick shot from behind. So my mom always said, do not lie to your kids about shots. Don't, I mean, it makes the drive to the doctor's office suck ass. Because the whole way there,
but you have to think about it either way. So if you say, there are times where I'm like, I'm not sure. So let's plan for yes.
Yes.
Because sometimes, especially because we delayed our kids a year for school, so their kindergarten shots were spread out. So I'm always like, I'm not sure.
We didn't know this last time we went, and Mikey ended up having to get him, and Zach didn't. And I was like, sorry.
Oh, right? Yeah. But you also have to remember that one little lie that you tell your kid, like, oh no, honey, we're just going to get a checkup. And then you take them. So that one car trip might be pleasant, but you're going to pay for it for the next 12 years. Because I was that 12-year-old that was kicking and screaming about shots. Yeah. And death, I don't lie about death, which I do want to get into a little bit later. However, and Jenelle and I are on the same page on this, I wouldn't classify it as lying, but we do not tell the truth about if you have kids. Pause it right now.
Beep, boop, beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, beep.
About Santa and Easter and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
My daughter was petrified of this leprechaun that visited our house over St. Patrick's Day.
Leprechauns are so fucking crazy.
Right? And I'm pretty sure my son already knew, he was already in on it. And so I told her that one. Personally.
And I think that's something you have to decide between your household. Our kids have both had fears about the tooth fairy that we've had to address. And if this becomes a thing where like they think a creepy zombie bunny is like coming into their house in the middle of the night, like my kids aren't fans of the Easter bunny coming in. So they stay outside. I get that. Like, let's not force it on them, but also like if they're into it and if it's fun for them, let them keep it.
Exactly. But we do know people who tell their kids the truth from day one about all of these, what are they, mythical creatures or whatever you want to call them. Fictional. Yeah. But that was just not how I was raised. And it brought such a magical and joyous element. I think my son is starting to pick up on it, but I'm just going along with it because it's fun. And he loves doing this kind of stuff for his little sister.
What if Ezra says, Mom, is Santa real?
I don't know. That's a hard one.
Mine is always if Zach said, like, Zach asked me if something was real. I'm scared he's still awake. And I was like, well, do you think it's real?
Well, that's a good point.
Like, let him lead. And he'll be like, well, I don't know. Because like you said to me, like, it must have been Santa because he was like, there's the guy at the mall. That can't be the same Santa. And
we've
then
had that talk.
But then you see them like in the movie. What's that cute movie with Kurt Douglas? Is that his name? The Goldie Hawn's husband. The new Santa movie on Netflix, but he was like, well, that's not the real Santa. And so he has like identity crisis, but like I say, do you think he's real? And he says, yeah, I just don't think that the one at the mall is real. And I'm like, yeah, I think Santa has friends that help pretend to be him at the mall. But you can still talk to them and they'll talk to Santa. If they straight up ask me something and I'm not sure what they believe, I'll always turn it back on them.
That's a good one. Like we haven't had the straight up, is he real? But we've had the questioning. And it was a joke growing up and it still is because apparently I asked my mom when I was probably like 7 or 8 and she cried and told me and like, you know, did the whole spiel like he lives in your heart, all this stuff. It's a magical time of year, all that stuff. My brother never asked her. So it's always a joke of like, oh, we can't talk about it in front of Matt. And my brother's like in his mid-30s, like, and he still plays along. And he was like, what do you mean?
He
never asked.
So much.
Never asked.
Matt's coming. Don't say
exactly. Even though I was the younger sibling. Right?
Oh my God, that's so funny. One of our girlfriends says her older daughter knows that it's not real and her younger doesn't. And she says, if you want to receive, you have to pretend to believe. And I think that is
I love that. I'm going to take
magic.
That.
The number one thing to build honest children is to model honesty yourself.
Yes.
It's one thing to say to your kids that honesty is important, but then when they see you lying, it sends a mixed message. And this article also goes on to say all kids lie as early as 2.5 for some kids. By age 4, all kids lie. By age 6, some estimates are that kids lie as often as once an hour.
I believe it.
Do you really? See, I feel
especially if they're in, and I get into this on my part, especially if they're in a peer group. Yes, I believe it.
Ooh. Okay, I'm so excited because when I read this, I was like, really? Because I feel like Zach just tells me everything that's on his brain and it's never muddled. If they count lying as like, I'm Leonardo, you're definitely not an actual Ninja Turtle, but I don't know what they consider. Modeling honesty, don't set them up as number two. Tell
Mhm.
positive stories, which I thought was really interesting. I know that George Washington is a questionable character right now, but this is what the article talks about. George Washington and the cherry tree, which illustrates a positive consequence of
Mhm.
honesty versus the story of the boy who cries wolf, which I did. I used the boy who cried wolf on Zach the other day when we were on a walk. And I was like, oh, so they're saying don't use stories with negatives for lying, use stories with positives for telling the truth, which I thought
Yes.
was very, 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 very interesting. Say truth telling makes you happy. Children
Mhm.
under the age of 8, this article says, are super motivated by pleasing authority figures. So say, I love when you tell me the truth. Catch them being honest, which I do with Zach a lot. And I've seen you do with Ezra. Like, I really
Positive
appreciate
reinforcement. Yeah.
uh-huh. I really appreciate that you came in here and told me the truth. You
Mhm.
and we'll talk about it all the time. You get in trouble when you don't tell the truth, but when you tell the truth, guess what? You're scot-free. And sometimes they'll come in and tell me a truth that I know was hard for them, and I'll be like, "Thank you for telling me the truth. Here's a piece of
Mhm.
candy. I don't even care.
You do
Have a
you.
piece of candy at
Exactly.
noon."
I agree. I'm gonna build off of that and go backwards. So I'll save the why we lie, all of us, for the end.
Oh, I can't
Okay,
wait.
because I really like yours and a lot of ours kind of overlap. We did not touch notes on this one. I kind of broke it down because I've had friends reach out to me and be like, "Oh my gosh, we're dealing with lying." And I've reached out to people and I feel like it's such a hot topic. And I feel like there's two situations. One, your kid is lying and you are 1,000% sure they are lying. Two, you think your kid is lying. And personally, I approach those in completely different ways. First of all, for both situations, never start out being like, you're lying, because that's going to put their wall up. They're going
Yeah.
to be defensive. Even if you do it with a coworker, a husband, anyone else, when you start pointing the finger, that wall goes up. And chances of
Okay.
you getting the truth, very slim. They are going to do whatever they can to avoid the blame. So they're probably going to lie on top of a lie. Um,
Perfect.
yes. And so if you're 100% sure that they're lying, you give them the chance to tell the truth. Do not focus on the fact that maybe they slipped up and they didn't tell the truth. And say it's like a bigger situation, like they bit a sibling or they hit a sibling. It wasn't just like, oh, you accidentally knocked mommy's coffee over. I'm talking about bigger situations. And I use Janelle's line. And then I sit there because my son is he's a very, I don't know what the word is, like he overthinks everything, but sometimes in a positive way. I will say, just so you know, I know what happened in this situation, whether it's I have it on video, I saw it with my own eyes, your sister has an actual mark on her and there's no one else in the house.
I
So
can see Mikey's actual dental indentations
exactly,
in your foot.
I will tell him the consequences. I will say he bit his sister, which he actually has never done. And say the consequence of you biting your sister is X. However, the consequence of you lying and biting is X and X. And so chances are he's gonna go with the truth because he doesn't want the double consequence.
Yeah.
And then I do the same as Janelle and I make a huge deal and I hug him. I tell him I love him. And I'm like, I am so proud of you for telling the truth. And that just really makes mommy so happy. It makes me feel like I have confidence in you. I know some people don't agree with telling your kids that their actions make you happy, but my son loves it. And so I do it. So,
Oh, I like
yeah.
that.
Okay. So if you think your kid is lying, but you're not 100% sure, I sit down and I kind of give like a little guilt trip. Like, I really, really hope you're telling me the truth because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to choose to believe you. And if I find out somehow that you weren't telling me the truth, then that's really going to hurt my trust in you. I personally will not punish if I am not positive that they're lying because
Same.
they run into the situation of your son is like, no one believes me, no one trusts me. So, like, why do I care? Why do I tell the truth?
Yes.
It's hard.
Especially for a kid like Ezra, I feel like, because I
Yes,
feel like he can take on only so many like emotional weights
exact. Oh my
before
gosh, yes,
it's too much. Like Ezra has a
yes,
5 weight limit and
yeah.
then he's just left the building where
And there's
I,
been times where I'm like, I'm 99% sure he's lying. And then my daughter will come tell me later that it was her. And I'm like, and
yes.
this is when she was like 2. And I'm like, I didn't think you would ever do that. Like,
Yeah.
it just like blows my mind. And so it proved me wrong that he was actually telling the truth.
Well,
And
and who
I,
even knows what the truth
oh
ever
my
is?
gosh,
Like we've had
yes.
incidents on play dates where so and so did this to
Mm,
so and so and so and so did this to so and so, but there's no parent there to see it and everybody's got a different story. So
yes.
like I will tell my kids, like, if you did it, what do you think you should do? But if we can't get a true story out
No.
of it, I'm not going to persecute anyone. I'm not going to yell at someone else's kid. I'm not going to yell at my
Mm-mm.
kid. If there's no direct line of vision, I am not
Nope.
going to react because that just doesn't do anybody any
Nope.
good.
And then the be an example, I'm so glad you brought that one up because that is honestly a struggle for I think everyone. And you have to remember
Yeah.
your kids are watching. Janelle and
All
I
the
were talking the
time.
other day, and my little 3-year-old just starts chiming in our conversation from the other side of the yard. And we were just like, oh,
Oh,
okay. No
Peyton's been in
idea we
this.
had an audience, but okay, guess it's girl chat. You never know. And I've come across situations where I have lied, especially when it comes to the beginning of COVID. I was really nervous about offending people. And first of all, Janelle did say, if you're lying to protect your family, it's okay. And I was like,
I did
okay,
say
cool.
that.
And it was basically like, well, we're going to come visit no matter what. And so I had to
Yes.
like lie and be like, well, we're not going to be here because
And
they
you
could
felt
not
bad about it.
understand. I did. I felt so bad, but I made sure it wasn't in front of my kids, but I did end up telling my son about it later. And I explained why I lied.
Ooh.
I feel like it's such a good example for your kids to know that like you also struggle with lying and we struggle with all those internal conflicts just like they do.
Can I interrupt you for one part of
Of
this?
course.
Okay, so I'm going to just read you directly from this article.
Yeah.
Those are called pro-social lies. According to this article, pro-social behavior is you are telling a lie to keep a social relationship. Teaching tact. Kids learn early from their parents how to lie for the sake of politeness or to avoid hurting someone's feelings.
Interesting.
Thanks. This book looks great instead of I already have this book or I can't play because I'm
Yes.
busy instead of I don't like playing with you. Researchers call these kinds of lies pro-social because they smooth our interactions with others. But being honest does not have to equal being rude or hurtful. In the case
Mhm.
of the book, this might mean saying it's an author they like or expressing appreciation for the thought that went into choosing the book. And this is something I don't do well. Like my kids will be like, I already have this, and I'll be like, shh.
Yeah, right?
So I am modeling to them like we lie to appease other people
Mhm.
when in no regard do I want my kids lying to appease other people.
Right.
I'm
I like
teaching
that.
them to
That's a
lie
good
to
idea.
appease other people
Yeah.
while and so it says the key is to balance honesty with considerations for the other person's feelings. We want to teach our children to be honest, but we want to teach them to be kind as well. We need to teach honesty in a way that potentially helps others rather than potentially hurts
Yes.
others.
And that makes me feel better about the situation I lied about
See?
because it was a one-time situation.
Yep.
It was like an out of town kind of thing. I was so nervous about ruining that relationship. And that's
Mhm.
when Janelle was like, just do it. Just lie. And so, and I did, like I said, I told my son, so that makes me feel better. Like
Yeah,
I
you're
saved the
doing
relationship. So
but you also explained it to your son, and I
yeah.
also think that I remember when I was growing up, we would get the worst presents from my dad's side of the
Oh my gosh.
family, and me and my cousin, who is now deceased, but we would sit and it was our joke to see who could put on the bigger show about the terrible present, and we had this one aunt that would always give us, like, a corny coin medallion, and we would be like, "Oh my god, this is the most beautiful but my parents were very strict about making a big fuss over every present, even if it was, like, garbage. So I think I learned really early on, like, put your own reality aside to appease others, and that has
Mhm.
definitely been a weakness throughout my life. I wanna raise kids that can
Mhm.
be more fluid in being respectful
Mhm.
versus being dishonest.
Yes. I'm not gonna lie, like, it
You
is a
should
struggle
lie.
between I'm not, it's a struggle between my husband and I because I see his omission of things as a lie.
Mhm.
And when I say omission, it's not like he was like, I went out with my friends, and then it turns out there was like a woman with him. You know what I mean? It's nothing big like that,
Ooh.
right? But I personally see that. And so it's been a struggle between our relationships, and my kids see how much it means to me. And my husband's gotten so much better about openly talking about it and his struggle
Yeah.
with it because he doesn't come from an open family. He comes from like very people pleasing family. And so he does everything to appease people, whether that's not saying anything or just saying what people want to hear. And so it's
Yeah.
been a constant struggle because I'm over here like, oh my gosh, you left the doors open and there's 100 flies in the house. And I'm like, sorry, I over exaggerated. Like, and he's like over here just like omitting things. And then it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. We just get into
Well,
it
I
over
had
it.
the same thing. Remember, I've had the same issue during COVID when
Mhm.
Josh would go out and travel and then was making choices that we hadn't agreed upon. This is
Yeah.
back when COVID was a mystery illness that no one knew how you got it. And we made like a family plan. And then Josh would go out and do things that weren't in alignment with the family plan and then not tell
Mhm.
me. And then I would end up finding out. And I had obviously built up such a big reaction to
Mhm.
him doing something out of our agreement that he was more apt to lie to me, and he's never been a liar to me before this. So I had
Yeah.
obviously built up such a big reaction that his fear of my reaction was bigger than telling me the truth. And
Yes.
that goes to show that you can do the same thing for your
Yeah.
kids. And that's a part of this article too, that tells you if you make a huge reaction, your likelihood of seeing a lie is increased
Mhm.
tremendously.
And I will say, like, in our house, we are brutally honest with our kids. We do talk about, like I mentioned, death. However, when my grandfather died not that long ago, as well as when my dad died, I reserved space for myself and I didn't tell them right away. It did not impact my kids in the moment because both of those family members lived in another state.
Yeah.
However, my son saw my mom even the day she passed. So he was there for all of it and I answered all of his questions and we
Yeah.
talked about it. It was such a big part of both of our lives. And my mom, if you haven't heard the grief podcast, which will be released before this one, she passed away from cancer. So it wasn't a quick passing.
Yeah.
He was with me to take care of her a lot of the time. And so he saw
Mhm.
that. And so in his vocabulary was death, cancer,
Mhm.
sickness, hospitals. Like chemo. He knew those words.
Mhm.
And I personally don't see anything wrong with giving yourself space if you're dealing with a hard
Yeah.
situation and then telling your kids
Yep.
because you're not lying to them. But sometimes you have to get your head wrapped around it. And honestly, I'm always the bearer of bad news, I feel like. And I just needed a minute. So I
Yeah,
took
and
that
I did
minute.
the same thing with my dad, and I think I
Hmm.
said on the grief podcast, we drove all the way to Minnesota. We left at 2 in the morning and grabbed
Hmm.
my kids out of their pajamas. We were at the gas station at 4 in the morning buying donuts, and my kids are in their pajamas, and this is something that's never happened since or before. And my oldest is like, "What is going on?" And I was like, "Bumpa's really sick. We need to get back to Minnesota to help." And I knew he was dead,
Hmm.
but it wasn't the time to be honest.
Yes.
So,
We talk also about, we're honest about our personal struggles. I talk about my mental health. When my kids are like, why do you take those pills? I don't say, mommy needs them. I don't say, don't worry about it. It's a mom thing.
yeah.
I tell them, and I tell them openly. My husband is an alcoholic and he talks to the kids about it. When they say, why doesn't daddy drink? He tells them. We don't
Yep.
dwell on it. We say
Nope.
that
Yep.
and then that's it. And it comes up every now and then, but that's about it.
That's
And
how our house
personally,
is too.
yes.
Zach will say, "Why does dad drink and you don't drink?" And I'll say, "Well, mommy doesn't drink because mommy's family has a history of alcoholism. And when you grow up, you'll have to be careful about drinking because, sorry, you might have got that from me." And I
Mhm.
say the same thing about mental health.
Exactly.
I say, "Mommy has to take this medicine because her brain doesn't make all the right chemicals. And someday your brain might not make all the right chemicals. And
Mhm.
then you have to take some medicine just like you take vitamins." And then I move on with my day.
So, mom gave me fucked up genes is what you're saying.
Technically, yeah. But I have great teeth and his dad has bad teeth.
Take all that information and now let's package it up in this nice little bow because I think after researching why people and kids lie, it made so much sense and it's so much easier to implement these little tips. There are two like main reasons. So the first one for kids, especially as well as some adults, it's not always out of deceit, but it's a wish. Even adults do this.
Mm.
We want to be seen in our best light. So think about it when you're dating a person. When you're dating a person, you don't go on the date and be like, so my parents died. I'm on a ton of mental health medications. I lost my job last week and my underwear are dirty. No,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you've got your best face on. You're wearing your best outfit. You're talking about things that make yourself seem pretty awesome.
Okay,
That's
I'm here
kind
for
of
this.
like what we do. And
Yeah.
there are studies that show men are more likely to do this, especially in a marriage, because they still want their wives to see them as this, like holy. Versus women really value honesty. And so we're more likely to show our flaws, and men are more likely to cover them up. And I thought that was just
Totally.
really
I
interesting.
totally can relate to
Yes.
that. Josh is still like peacocking around here.
Right?
And I'm like, have you seen my
Yes.
sweatpants that I've been wearing for the week?
I
I need
know.
my weekly sweatpant
Exactly.
change.
Yes. If you switch it to the kid, when they say, no, I didn't do XYZ, it's because they really wish they didn't. They wish
Yes.
they had
Yes.
thought that through. Or if it was an
Hmm.
accident, if they accidentally knocked something over, they really wish they didn't do it. And so
Yeah.
it's a wish. Think about our kids and their imaginations. They're in this imaginative state all the time.
Yep.
It comes so easily to them. So we see it as deceit. We see it as something that's really, really negative and bad. And it's like
Mhm.
they actually have an innocent intention behind the lie. And I was like, that's actually a really good point.
Well, and they don't know anything different. They don't
No.
know that making up fantastical stories is seen as wrong, just like they don't
Yeah.
know that
Right.
running out into the street is a bad choice. Like
Yes.
they are little balls of mush that until they realize that lying puts you in an awkward position socially in the future when someone's like, "Hey, I thought you had a Corvette." And you're like, "Oh, shit. You can clearly see that I do." Like
Right.
they have no frame of reference for why
Right.
lying would be bad. It's just exciting and fantastical.
Exactly. I feel like from a young age, kids, everybody is such a people pleaser, and they learn, like, think about a baby. Like, our babies go through that mimic stage. They don't just mimic us, but like they do something and we laugh. And what do? Over and over and
Yeah.
over,
Yeah.
trying to make us happy and laugh. And same thing with kids. It's like, okay, well, if I really wish this happened and if I say it happened, then it's going to make mom and dad happy. And so they say
Oh,
this little
I
fib.
love it.
I know. Then
Thank you for making their lying
I know.
cuter. I
This
mean,
one's
you're
not
gonna
as
ruin it
fun.
now, aren't
Yeah,
you?
I am. Also scared of the punishment or the reaction that their truth telling gets them.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like really a big deal to not make a big deal about it, because
Yep.
the bigger deal, the more you yell, the bigger their punishment. Now, I'm not saying reward lying, but the bigger their punishment, they're going to try and hide this. We're not
Yep.
perfect. We're going to make mistakes and have to confront those mistakes. And so if mom and dad find out about my mistakes, then I'm going to be in trouble versus
Or I'm bad.
exactly.
Our
Oh,
kids are very
oh,
into I'm bad
yes. Which is
when they're
what
not
funny
bad.
because we never use those words. That's something
No,
my
but they
grandma was like,
always
never
are,
call a kid bad.
but they
It's
are
so,
sure
yes.
they're bad.
And so if you're like, oh, I'm really disappointed my coffee spilt. Can you help me clean this up? Versus it was similar to what Janelle mentioned. Did you spill my coffee? They're going to say no, even if you
Yeah.
saw them do it. You're yelling and you're overreacting about
Yep.
something. However,
Mm.
if they're doing something really vicious, try and see why are they doing that. If they're biting their
Yes.
sister, if they're punching their brother, if they're hitting their friends, you need to look at the action and say, okay, the issue is not the lying. The issue is this action before the
Yep.
lying. Because
Yep.
the lying is just they're trying to save their little butts from getting whacked. That also goes into one last little thing I wanted to bring up. I do think some people lie to manipulate. This is something we preach no in our house. This is a really innocent example. But when we were potty training my daughter, my son would say things like, if you go potty, I'm going to go to the store and buy you a toy. And so I looked at him and I was like, okay, son, if she potties right now, you have to go get your piggy bank, give me some money, order something on
Mhm.
Amazon because it was during the pandemic for your sister. And he was like, well, no, I just really want her to go. And I was like, but when she goes, she's gonna want that prize. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, if you're saying these things, this is a form of fibbing because you're fibbing to her. And what's gonna happen when you don't give her the toy? And he was like, she's gonna cry. And I was like, exactly. And then when we go to the potty the next time, do you think she's gonna wanna go? And he was like,
Yeah.
no. And I was like, exactly. She now has a negative experience. So we've been really big about that. Like,
And we're giving really like fluffy examples, but there are
because
kids
that's the
that are
stage we're
lying.
in.
But yeah, but there are kids that are lying to be liars. There are
Oh,
bad
yes.
kids. I mean, sorry, there are bad kids. But
Mhm.
generally a 5, 6, 7-year-old
Yeah.
isn't fully equipped to be fully manipulative.
And if
But
they are, why? Why are they doing that?
why? And a big part of what I've read is that it's coming from parents overreacting. So this one says talks about disciplining calmly. In environments where punishments are doled out too harshly and arbitrarily, research shows that kids learn to lie even earlier and more skillfully than their counterparts in less punitive environments. So manipulative lying is akin to skillful lying, I feel
Mhm.
like. Developing the ability to lie can be seen as a protective measure. And what you're talking about with Ezra, like saying, like, I'm gonna give you a treat for peeing. Zach will do this to Mikey too. Like, first one to
Yeah.
the car wins a new toy. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not buying anyone a toy, so that's not true. But I really like to be like, well, that's not true because I never said that. But I also will say, like, okay, you can buy it for them. And another thing about the lying is it can be an attention seeking behavior. And I was talking with my mom about this, and we were talking about how, sometimes kids don't care if the reaction is good or bad. They just
Mhm.
want the attention and the reaction. And so if lying gets a screaming reaction from a parent that has been a little bit not paying attention, that's all a kid's looking for, is the reaction from the parent. And so,
And we've dealt with this with my son, not in terms
mhm,
of lying, but in terms of other behaviors. He'll act out to get attention, even if it's negative attention, he just wants
yep,
that attention. And it
yep,
took my husband and I a long time to realize this.
yep,
He's doing this on purpose because he wants attention. He doesn't care if he's getting in trouble. He
doesn't
just wants our
care.
attention.
Yeah.
And it's beyond our comprehension, but it's so common in kids.
And it's also very going to be very common going into teen years. I was the same way growing up. I would do as many naughty things as a teenager as I could because I didn't care the
Mhm.
reaction I got. I just wanted somebody to sit down. Like when my parents were in very tumultuous stages, I would love that if I did something bad enough as a teenager, we were all going to sit around at the table together until midnight discussing what I had done and eating snacks together. But my parents were in
Aw.
such a tumultuous state of like divorce and
Mhm.
my mom's mental illness struggles and my mom's alcoholism and different, like, and I was
Yep.
a really bratty teenager because I just loved getting in trouble for the sake of getting in trouble. And this goes on to talk about what to do with teenagers, but we're not quite there yet. But 98% of teenagers worldwide wide lie to their parents.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
and I completely agree with that. Another part it talks about with teenagers is teenagers have an innate desire for space. And so we're not there
Mhm.
yet, but a lot of us are coming up into this preteen as it comes earlier and earlier. A part of this article I thought was really interesting, even if you don't have teenagers yet, is respecting teens' natural desire for privacy can encourage more honesty. You don't want to be intrusive, but you don't want to get into their business any more than you need to. For example, you need to know your teen was safely at a friend's house on Friday night. You do not need to ask them what they talked about. So keep it on a need to know basis. If they still clam up, you don't want me to butt into your business. I can see that. And I don't want to butt into your business, but I have to know
Mhm.
because.
And
Yeah.
again, it's that communication. I have to know because personally, like in our house, my son, which I think a lot of us are in this stage where everything is just so literal and it's this or that, it's black or white. And so when
I'm
I
bad or
say,
good. I
yes,
mean, I'm nice. Yeah.
so for instance, we were supposed to go to the amusement park, like one of those big holiday in the park things. And the flu hit our house. And my son is like, "Are we going?" And he was the first to get it. So he's feeling better. But now everyone else is down for the count. And so he's like, "Oh, so we're still going tonight, right?" And we're like, "No, honey." And he's like, "Well, why'd you lie to me? You're lying to me." And so we had to step back and I had to say, "You know what? It was a promise, but I cannot keep it right now because we are all sick. However, when we get better, we will go. And I am sorry, and this is disappointing, and it feels like I'm lying to you, but I had no intention of lying to you. I did not know we were going to get sick. I already had the tickets. And so just having that communication with him
Yeah.
really helped him. He was still upset instead of being like, "Well, I'm sick. Can't you respect that? I took care of you for a week while you
Yeah.
were sick." I mean, they have huge, huge emotions and they don't know what's going
That's
on
a
half the
really good
time.
point though too, because I even fail at that sometimes
And
a
I
lot.
will say something that's helped us in our household. First of all, if you have kids and if you have multiple kids, you know that things come in phases. And all of a sudden, your kid is lying, lying, lying when they had no history of lying before. Or all of a sudden, your kid is biting all the time. It's
Yeah.
these weird little things that they do in these like phases. We had this with both of my kids at one point, these little tiny lies, and they were about everything. And I'm sure part of it was also trying to figure out this whole like truth telling thing. Where's the
Yeah.
line kind of thing?
Mhm.
What can I get away with?
Yep.
So we tried this out with my son and it worked so well. We did it with my daughter. It was almost like a gamble. They wouldn't know if they were going to get a consequence or not. And so every now and then we would surprise them and be like, you know what? You've had a really hard time telling the truth lately, but I'm so proud of you for telling the truth. No consequence. And just give them a great big kiss and send them on their way. I
Yep.
swear it nipped it in the bud so quickly.
That's really true. If you just like
Yes.
blow their minds far enough out the back of
Yes.
their little heads. I've
Right?
had the same thing. I've been
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you lied to me, but you know what? You've been such a good brother to Mikey lately. I'm going
Yep.
to let it slide. I love you. Please
Yeah.
don't do it again.
Yep.
Sometimes you just have to send them
Yes.
into the matrix and
They
see
get
what happens.
so happy, and then all they want is cuddles and to tell you all
Yeah.
their secrets. It's the cutest
I think
thing.
that's a really good point too, because they do go in these weird little times of like
Oh my gosh.
polarizing lying or
Yes.
polarizing anger or these
Mhm.
crazy intense emotions, these like leaps, they call them.
Yes.
If you can every once in a while just take a step back, which you're really good at, is just taking a step back and being like, how could I flip the script on him here?
Right? I'm
You'll
just
be
gonna throw him
surprised.
for a loop. Like
Watch this. I caught you in
our
a lie.
first
I'm not
son,
going to punish you.
our firstborn has thrown us for a loop. So it might seem like I know a lot. It's because I've researched a
But you
lot.
know,
I've listened
you're
to
ahead of
podcasts.
me because
Oh my
my
gosh. You're
firstborn was an
second. Yeah.
easy saint. My second is not a saint. And so
No.
I'm using all of your expertise from your oldest on my youngest.
And now I'm using the stuff from your oldest on my youngest. Like it's crazy. But I would have it no other way. Like my son keeps it interesting. But there
They
were
keep
a
it
few tricky
lively.
years, especially those toddler years. So if you're in toddler years with a spirited child, feel free to reach
Oh,
out to me because I
bless
feel
you.
ya. I was like, I just
Mm.
must not like toddlers, and now I'm like, oh, I love my
Well,
toddler
and that's
now.
another
Like,
episode that we've gotten some requests for is
yes,
I love my child, but I don't always like my child. You
yep,
are not alone if you feel that way, and we're gonna do a whole episode on it because
yep,
it's okay to not be always sure if you guys are into each other. That is a part of it is what people don't talk about enough is we all lie. I lie,
uh-huh.
you lie, we probably both lied today. We don't always like our kids, we don't always
No,
like each other, we don't always like our husbands, we don't always like our neighbors. It
mm-mm,
is okay to lie, it is okay to not like people, but we are just here to give you what has worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, the expertise of my aunts who have had 60 years of child raising each and tell you some of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way and what doesn't work for us and why they do it. I was so excited
mm-hmm.
to hear Jenna's whys tonight that I could barely
Yes.
wait.
Those help me a lot. Like
They
understanding you're like, oh
do.
wait, you're normal and you're not doing this maliciously, and I love you. So
I don't
yeah,
think that lying necessarily always comes from a bad place. My
no,
husband is the best man I know, but he has made some lying decisions during this pandemic. That doesn't make him a bad person, just like it doesn't
no,
make Mikey a bad person when he lies. There's any of these
mm-mm,
people, it doesn't make me a bad person, doesn't make you a bad person for
nope.
telling that person you didn't want them to come to visit you during the height of the
Oh
pandemic
my
when
gosh.
all the ICU units were full. It
Yep,
doesn't make anybody a bad person. It makes us human. And if we can talk
exactly.
about our human shortcomings a little bit more, it will feel less icky and lonely.
And your kids will see that you're human, and they'll know it's okay. So
Well, and I love that you caught yourself lying and then explained to your son about why you were lying. And I think that's something that I want to take away from this. If I
mhm,
see myself lying in front of my sons, I want to say, ooh, and check it and explain it to
mhm,
them. Because I've been one of those moms that encourages them to like, oh, pretend you like that toy and that you don't already
mhm.
have it. Or like hold on to them and be like, okay, like let's prep for how we're going to carry this falsehood into the world. And we've even had to lie as a family during this time of transition from my husband's old job to the new job. And because we weren't like allowed to talk about things. And so I had to tell my kids, like, okay, when we go over to so and so's house, you
Mhm.
can't, or I've even before you
Oh,
told
that's so
Ezra,
hard. Yeah.
I had to say to Zach, I need you to not tell Ezra that we are moving because his mom hasn't told him yet and nothing isn't written in stone yet. And we're just not going to tell him because it could hurt his feelings when he doesn't need to have his feelings hurt. So it's a weird
Yeah.
boundary that I think we all have to explore. But I also
Mhm.
think no child is born intrinsically bad and
No,
meant to lie maliciously. It's a
exactly.
behavior that is a symptom of something else. And if we can get
Mhm.
to the bottom of that, or just accept it and say, hey, guess what? They're testing out this new tool they have in their little brain toolbox.
Let's see how it goes.
But let's
Let's
see what
experiment with them.
happens.
Just start lying back to them about ridiculous things like,
oh my gosh,
guess
guess where we're
there's
going
school
today?
even though it's Saturday. Let's go.
Or let's tell Ezra and Zach when they wake up tomorrow that we're taking them to Legoland in New York City, or the New York Legoland that they're both obsessed with.
And then if we didn't, Ezra would never talk to me again.
And he'd never look at me again. He'd be like,
No.
you guys are the worst.
Let's just all experiment with this. Let us know how
try
it
it out.
goes.
Yep. Let us tell your kids a lie about something fun that you're going to do tomorrow, and then don't do it.
Well, very cool. I liked this episode. I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you guys have any tips or tricks, please share them because we want this to be a community and we want you guys to like, because
tell us your old family wives' tale that has been passed down from your aunties about how to keep kids from lying. Tell us what you have found to work. Tell us what doesn't work, and tell us what a hellscape we're in for. We're here touting about how not to lie, and there's all these parents probably listening with teenagers like, "Oh, girl, just wait."
Right.
And I was
actually,
sneaking out of my house with my vodka backpack on at 14.
Oh my gosh! Right. I wasn't sneaking out of my house. Well, I was sneaking out the window usually, or saying, "Oh, I'm spending the night at so and so."
Oh, I'll be at Sarah's house. Just kidding. I'm over at Luke in his friend's apartment that's in college.
Exactly. Actually, what I would prefer is on the Instagram post, if you just tell us your family's deepest, darkest lie and secret, because I'm just really into that stuff. I know a lot of you, and so I would just really appreciate that. So
I would love it. And I think we'll tell our own. No.
Yeah. You won't know. I'm going to use an anonymous name. So with that, make an appointment and call your therapist.
And take your meds.
2, 3, 4.